the President, His Excellency, did a very good thing to address and to cushion Kenyans. He reduced pay-as-you-earn, income tax, which is pay-as-you-earn, VAT, and many other measures, including corporate tax. But those provisions that would have cushioned Kenyans were lifted on the 1st of January. So they were lifted on the 1st of January, and now in February and in March, we are saying that we expect still to revive to 5.4, going to 7%. I don't see the connection, Mr. Speaker, and that is what we really should have been asking as a finance committee. Mr. Speaker, we have issues. The report talks about the net credit issues, that net credit to the private sector expanded to 8.2% by November 2020, and the net credit growth of 17%, Mr. Speaker, was driven by 42% growth in net credit to the public sector. Mr. Speaker, therein lies our biggest problem. And I'm glad the Vice Chair has mentioned it, that, we can be awed by numbers, but is there money in the pockets of Kenyans? And for the longest time, Kenyans feel that there is no money in their pockets because they have been crowded out of the domestic market by government. In fact, one proposal that the Finance Committee should have proposed, Mr. Speaker, is what we have in other jurisdictions like India, that you can borrow what you want. But from the domestic market, the budget, the borrowing mix, the credit mix must reach a certain level. Because, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about close to 700 billion that you're intending to borrow from the domestic market. Which bank would then give Ochilo Ayako and Sons Limited a loan for your business? You cannot do that. And that is why we have had a lot of job losses, because the private sector is bleeding. The SMEs are bleeding. We see Nairobi as the hub of entrepreneurship in this continent, yet we are milking, or rather we are blocking the private sector from growing by making them not access this credit. And by there, I don't believe we have a debt problem. We have a deficit problem in this country. And the deficit problem is because we have decided that we must do a budget of 3 trillion. 3 trillion shillings. The thought that we must achieve everything in 5 years or in 2 years, I think there is fallacy in that economic thinking, Mr. Speaker. And that is what must be reviewed. If we want to save the economy of this country, we need to be talking about how we reduce the budgets going forward and end up in the next 3 or so years with a 1.5 trillion budget, which we can adequately service. Mr. Speaker, I remember Honorable Muraria, when he was finance minister, saying very proudly that we will fully finance our budget. 95% of our budget was financed by our taxes in this country. It's only 5% that was borrowed, and very little from the domestic market. And that is when that time, banks would come to hawk. I was in the university. They were coming to hawk loans at students. Please take this unsecured loan. Unsecured loan, and Kenyans felt that money. So that issue of debt and the issue of especially debt from the domestic market and the budget deficit must be addressed if we want to rescue this country, if we want to save our economy and for the future. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the expenditure on debt, the biggest project that this government does every year is paying our debt. That's the biggest project. We send more than thrice the amount of money we give to counties to paying debt. We're hitting 1 trillion annually. A trillion. Yet we're fighting over 370 billion to counties. So the biggest project actually is our debt payment. Now, these non-concessionary loans, Mr. Speaker, that are domestic of nature, and you should have tasked the budget committee, you should have tasked, and I wish I was a member of that committee, but I'm sure even with my remarks, I'll never be put there. We should have tasked the CS to tell us which ones has he renegotiated, because you need to renegotiate. I'm sure I'll never be put in there. You need to renegotiate those loans. Your 5-year, 7-year loans at 23% as a government. Yet you can get concessionary loans at close to 3%, even at 1% interest, and spread them to 30 years and beyond, so that you reduce the pressure. Because, as I said yesterday on a different topic, we're not borrowing. The burden of debt, and our constitution says, must be shared between generations. I really pity the next president of this country, whoever it will be. Because apart from servicing debt, there's probably nothing else you'll be able to do. And the next one, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the revenue outlook, I'm not sure, and I'm glad the whip is one who's been saying how we are squeezing the goose that lays the golden egg. Our revenue philosophy has become one of policing. rather than of incubating and building industry. Mr. Speaker, again I refer to the former government where President Mwai Kibaki used to say, kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea, and would encourage Kenyans everywhere on why they need to pay debt. They were even registering businesses on your behalf for you to be able to pay, your taxes. But today, you have a tax dispute of 10 billion. What do? We shut down your business. So not only do you pay what we think we owe you, tomorrow you will not pay anything else. Yeah? Look at Humphrey Kariuki's these companies. Look at Keroche, look at SportPesa. They are paying a lot of taxes. So we fight over the little that we don't agree on, and then we kill even that much that you are paying, Mr. Speaker. I think the philosophy of policing, of criminalizing businesses instead of encouraging and nurturing. Look at the IRS in the US. They'll come and sit with you and even assist you to grow your business so that we can have a bigger pool from where we raise revenue, Mr. Speaker. I think that's something that must be looked at. It's encouraging that the diaspora remittances have gone up despite COVID, but we need to be careful, and I'm sure the committee has shown. When you look at the fact that our import cover is good, and 4 months import cover is good, remember that in the last financial year, the cost of fuel went down. The cost of fuel was very low, and you know why? During COVID, there was very little international travel. So the demand was low. And when the demand was low then, we're able to say that, look, we have this X amount of reserves. Now, if you look at the projections, and in the past few weeks, how much the price of fuel has been going up, those numbers that you've been given might be fictitious to a certain extent. And I'd just like you to really look at it in terms of moving forward in the year. International travel has opened up. Planes are back. International companies, whether it is Boeing, whether it is the airlines, Emirates, Delta, KQ, etc. So you will not be able to have that kind of cover anymore. So the revenue outlook might not be realistic. Our import cover is not realistic. And if you look at sectoral expenditure, the focusing is not good. Mr. Speaker, we've spoken about post-corona economic recovery strategy. I would challenge the chair of the committee or any member of the committee to give us 5 points in that post-corona economic recovery strategy. Apart from the high-sounding words you were told by Treasury and stakeholders, okay, it sounds nice. It's a nice mouthful. It sounds smart when you say post-corona economic recovery strategy, but what are the 5 activities? You cannot have a budget this year that looks like last year's budget, but you're saying this one is post-corona economic recovery. There must be certain activities that are specific towards that economic recovery, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, many of them would have been the credit guarantee. How much are we putting to cushion businesses in terms of credit guarantee, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, there are many. Look at the hospitality industry that suffered the most. The industries that suffered the most, what are we doing to actually encourage investment in those industries and to cushion them, Mr. Speaker? We've seen the stimulus. The US Senate was discussing actual post-corona stimulus. When are we going to discuss such things for the people that we represent in this country? Or we'd rather just talk about the poetry around, the economic recovery strategy. So I dare say that there is actually no post-corona economic strategy. Because we've not seen it, and I wish I am wrong. I'd love to be proven I'm wrong. So there's lack of clarity in those policy interventions that we have, and none of them is being linked to the medium-term economic framework that this country is standing on, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you go to the counties, I'll just mention 2 things. I know many members want to speak. I'll mention a few things on the counties. Mr. Speaker, we had, and everyone who has spoken has alluded to it, we had a very colorful year last year. And the fruit of that, and I'm glad everyone is now very pragmatic in saying that, now we move forward, and we've been able to secure 400 billion, 370 to counties as a result of that engagement, which was robust. The chair said there was a serious team and a more serious team. I wonder how the more serious team was defeated 10 times, if it's more serious. But that notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, we've seen both the CRA and Treasury trying to be a bit crafty and saying that of the 370, it is only 316.5 that will be equitable share, that will be applied based on the formula that we passed, and then 34.6 or thereabout will be conditional grants. And then the rest will be, that it will be based on 316 only as the baseline. Then the rest is conditional, and then there is that transfer of certain MDAs from the national government, their roles to counties. We will resist that. We will not allow that. Our agreement was at 370, and in fact what we passed had even a simulation of how the 370 will be divided. So the conditional grants will come above the 370. And I hope members are listening keenly, because the devil is in the details. It is above 370 that we'll talk about the conditional and whatever else they want to adjust. And I'm confident it can be done. We have seen budgets of national government departments that run devolved functions that are bigger than budgets of entire counties. Look at agriculture. Look at health with 4 facilities and policy. You know, their budgets are bigger than many of your counties combined. That money should be transferred into the kitty of equitable share and not discretionary, national government saying where it must go to. That is the work of the Senate. And the cash disbursement schedule must be followed. Mr. Speaker, by the end of January, and I'll give you an example, my county, Nairobi, that I represent, and I'm very happy and proud as Senator, I brought 15 billion in the first year, and now, because of that fight, we've gone to 19 billion. Nairobi County, with a budget of 37 billion this financial year, when February, has only received 4.7 billion out of 37 billion. 4.7. On recurrent, 0 on development. Now we're in March. We're getting March, April, May, June, July. In 5 months, you'll want Nairobi to absorb 36 billion, or rather 31 billion. How will that work? So there's what we pass, but also I really urge this budget committee to help us in budget tracking and budget implementation, to make sure that what we pass actually goes in. Mr. Speaker, we gave our remarks as a committee. We gave them to the budget committee. I hope they have been looked at. We asked that, the biggest challenge in this country is unemployment, and more money must be put into dealing with employment. We talked about the National Employment Authority that actually has a huge role. In the last 4 years, they've actually helped us secure 70,000 jobs, which we can list. That is the one which I can say I know for sure. NEA has helped us secure 70,000 so far, and 70,000 was just in one country, Saudi Arabia. If you look at Oman, if you look at Dubai and all these other areas, there's a huge potential. And finally, we begged that in this budget policy, on top of the big projects we're doing, please let us incorporate a school feeding program. Our children are really struggling and suffering, especially in the urban areas, in their schools. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this report. Of course, I have no amendments to it, but I just ask that as a Senate, let us review our processes so that we're not just doing, PR or we're not working in vain. That the recommendations we make, they're very good recommendations, and I must applaud Senator Kiviru for leading this committee very well. And today he's dressed like a Minister of Finance. He has given his budget speech. I must applaud him. But please be more radical. And being radical and asking questions does not mean not supporting government, because I know these days there's that thing in the air that when you ask questions, you're not supporting. We support government, but we support government by telling the government the truth. We are going into a hole. If you ask us to raise the budget ceiling to 12 trillion, we shall refuse. We cannot allow that. In fact, we want the real consolidation by reducing our budgets moving forward to at least 1.5 trillion, and let's see how to do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.